by and large, we have two sections, right? The state sector and the private sector. So you have the state sector getting in excess of the minimum wage, but in the private sector, most of them are under the minimum, on the minimum wage, right? And just over. Now, the security officer, who by and large remains unrepresented, he is the most affected person in this entire scheme. So I want to go straight to start with the security officer, and then I'll go into the estate police officer. The security officer is covered under the Minimum Wage Act of 1995. Good. Curiously, if you look at the Minimum Wage Act 1995, sectorial orders contained therein, security industry employees, and you look at the other sectorial orders that are contained in that same act, catering, gas station attendants and the likes, right? Household assistants. You would find provisions for annual leave, sick leave, maternity leave, although maternity leave is covered by an act, so that is a given, and all the likes. When you go into the sectorial order for security industry, you would not find any provisions for annual leave, any provision for sick leave. What has happened is that in 1994, there was such an order. That order catered for annual leave, sick leave, and also for the provisions of uniforms, right? Even the maternity act was mentioned in that sectorial order. That in 1994, those things were there. 1995, it is completely absent from that sectorial order.
Who is constitution in
1994, Ken Collis, the then Minister of Labour, he signed the 1994 order, and it was also in 1995, right? That would have been, remember in 1995, you had the crossing of the floor issue, right? So but that election was in November, okay? Now we're not quite certain exactly when it was actually gotten, right? But the fact that it did happen between 1994 and 1995. So subsequent to that, what you saw happening, and it segues into the estate police, is that companies were charging officers for their uniforms. So you come to company X, you're working, you apply for the job, and you have to pay for your uniforms. And that today still happens in many of those companies. But if the 1994 order was in place, that would not be an issue, right? Also, you have companies now in the private security industry, some of the larger ones. We have seen a contract for somebody working telecom, which is one of the bigger companies, where they have, I think there's 5 days annual leave and 5 days sick leave or something like that, right? SWAT also has those sort of provisions. Not the 14 days that is catered for in the Minimum Wage Act. And it is because it is not stated in the order. They have that legality to do those sort of things. So here, the estate police law, by order of the Industrial Relations Act, is not a worker. Good? So you're not a worker under the Act. Then you're also not a worker under the Minimum Wage Act. Now, that was pronounced by the chairman of the special tribunal in the what we call the G4S judgment, which is ST 13 of 2012. We were quite amazed that that judgment wasn't appealed, because our opinion is that it was flawed in its pronouncement of that. Because when we look at the definition of worker in the IRA, right, which of course pronounces that the estate policeman is not a worker under the IRA. But in the Minimum Wage Act, the definition of worker is a different definition of worker than what is contained in the IRA to what is contained in the Minimum Wage Act. But somehow, the interpretation now was that the interpretation of the IRA is under the Minimum Wage Act. So thereby, you have now the security companies who have both security officers and the state police officers having double bites of the cherry. Right? So, if you don't have an agreement with the State Police Association, which gives you, which we of course negotiate for annual leave and for sick leave, right, and the provision of uniforms, those companies out there now are legally free. They're legally free. And that is what it is we have to bring to people, to the knowledge of people. Because I'm saying that as president of the association, we cannot continue to be negotiating in an environment where the laws do not support you. What is it? Why is it that this sector has been set aside and be treated totally different to other workers in this country? Okay, the IRA has pronounced under that for the purposes of the good of the community that the state police cannot be the workers because we have the right to withhold labor and all of that. And that will affect the community, the national community. We accept that. But what other provisions will affect the community, right? Especially in the light of annual leave, which is for rest. And you know officers work extremely long hours, right? And sick leave when they get sick. What value, what effect would that have on the national community for us to be excluded in that?
Well, we spoke earlier about morals. We spoke about that exactly.
But exactly, and the moral and the exploitation, right, that takes place in the industry. It has to change, and it only can change now by changing the laws. Give anybody representing security officers, right, the laws to back us so that when the exploitation take place, we can legally take it, because they're laughing, they say, well, I brought up the issue concerning the 5 days and they just disregarded it because it is not law. Right? There's no moral with these people. There's no equity. 10.3 speaks to equity. Where is the equity aspect of it? The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago in the preamble says that labor must not be forced out of economic necessity to live in inhumane conditions. If this is not inhumane conditions, we don't tell you what is. If you are charging me for uniforms, if you are charging me for everything, and then you're not paying my NIS, right? When I go by NIS, you're not paying it. And if you're charging me for coming for late calling in, right? You don't want to give me anything, right? There's no, you're not even providing insurance. You're not even providing a proper health plan, right? Then tell me if that is not inhuman. That is neo slavery. That is neo slavery, and that is what we are facing in this country. So everybody says, okay, what the APA doing about? What the APA doing about that? The law does not support the State Police Association. The law does not support the security officers. We think that because of our position of being a body that was formed by law, right? Even though the same law says that we cannot represent the security officers, right? That was a judgment, I think, in 2000 at Honeywell or something like that, right? We still have that moral obligation to raise this issue in public, because if nobody is saying it on their behalf, we think that we have a moral obligation because we are in the same industry. Most of the time we wear the same uniform. It's just a badge that distinguishes, a badge and a precept that distinguishes a security officer from an estate police officer. A security officer, we always say, is an estate police officer in waiting, because all he has to do is go and do a precept exam, right? And then he can become an estate police officer by law. Good? So, for evil to prosper, good men must do nothing. I think it's our responsibility to bring this to their attention. So we've written to the Minister of Labour, asking him to look at this. We've also written a letter to the Prime Minister, also asking him to look at this, right? We are going to go to the public and ask and bring this to the public attention and ask for support, because this cannot continue down the road. Why are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago being treated in this manner? Then, as I mentioned, citizens, we have the issue of this influx of Jamaicans and coming into the country, working with the private security industry. I received a call recently from one who told me that they're working for $16. He is here, he's married, has a family here. And because he's Jamaican, right, they are being paid $16 an hour. Oh, that is inhuman. No, we have issues considering how they're here and the legality of them working, right? But the fact is that these companies have seen it fit to even go under the minimum wage act.